Welcome back to the Grass and Roots podcast. I'm your host, Toree, and I try and use this space to shed some light on the inspiring individuals and organizations or movements that are making a real difference in their communities. In today's episode, I am joined by Lauren Jones, who is the Executive Director of Shreveport Green. Shreveport Green is an organization working to create healthier, more sustainable communities in Shreveport, Louisiana, through hands-on environmental initiatives and programs. Lauren and I talk about everything from urban farming and tree planting to food access and education, and she shares how community-driven efforts is what sparks real transformation. She also talked about her personal journey into this work of environmentalism, what drives her, and what it truly means to care for both people and the planet. I really enjoyed learning from Lauren and speaking with her, and I think that there's something in this conversation for everybody. I hope you all enjoy it as much as I did. Thank you for being here, Lauren. I want to get started by hearing more about your journey. What kind of got you into environmental work, and then what led you eventually to Shreveport Green?
Yeah, I love answering this question because I had no idea this is where I was going to go when I first started into this endeavor. Of course, as a child, I was raised in a very rural area, so I'm an only child, so it was very easy for me to just become friends with nature, and that is probably truly where it started. But if we want to get down to a more realistic pathway, when I graduated from college after 4 years, I had a bunch of friends that were, going to go travel the world and backpack. And I come from a background with not a whole lot of money, so that wasn't really a possibility for me. So I started researching ways I could travel because I also wanted to have a really fun experience. At the time, I had only been to Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Texas, Florida, and those are the hot spots that you hit when you're around here. And I'd always dreamed about going out to the West Coast and just seeing what's going on over there. And so I found a program called the WOOF program, and so it stands for Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. And so whenever I recommend folks to get interested in farming or and just see what it's like, or just a sideways ideas, like if they want to travel and experience life from where people are actually living in these areas, go through the WOOF program. So at the time it was 2009, and I got this book in the mail, and they have a list of all of these different farmers that are participating, and you get in touch with each individual farmer. Every one of them has a different expectation, so you could possibly get paid, but you could possibly not. So you just have to contact the farmer and see if y'all's ideals match up. Well, I met this farmer, and it was actually a family farm in Camino, California, which is about 20 miles east of Sacramento. So we were in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains. And I went out there and lived on a family farm, and it was an organic farm for a season where I got familiar with growing food. And at this point in my life, I'd never grown anything. I mean, nothing. And that's funny to say because coming from Benton, where there were more cattle than people, it is kind of wild that I didn't, but I'd never had exposure to it. And the really great thing about this program is they don't require that. So I got out there and found out that I absolutely loved it. It was almost as if a piece of my brain that had been lying dormant for forever was awoken. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this is the life I want to lead. I have to be in nature. I have to grow food. And yeah, it was just an eye-opening experience. So from that point on, I made it a mission in my life to, in some capacity, grow food and be immersed in that environment no matter what I was doing. So after I came back from California. I went back home, and I had a home in Ruston, Louisiana, and I decided I was going to be a homesteader. And everybody goes through this process where, I love now that I've got, decades of experience behind my belt. When people come forward and they say, I'm about to homestead, I'm like, oh yeah, you're in that moment where no matter what you do, you're going to have fun and you're going to fail. And that's just how it is. It's a consistent learning experience. And so that's, what I did. And I think that the value in that is learning how to be patient with nature, how to listen to nature, how to communicate in a way that we're not used to, because it makes you take your time and it makes you learn and listen. I got goats. That was one of the things in California we did. We had dairy goats, and I got some goats at my house, and one of them was pregnant. We didn't know, and all of a sudden I had a bunch of goats. And so I ran a nightclub, because in Ruston, Louisiana, that's where Louisiana Tech is. That's where I graduated. The population there is highly saturated with people trying to get jobs. So it's very, very hard to get a professional job after graduation, because there's stiff competition and not a whole lot going on. So I decided to run a nightclub for about 7 years. So my nighttime from about 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. was in a nightclub, but my daytime was in the woods with my goats and my cats. And truly, those moments are, when I look back at it, those are some of the most brilliant moments that I had with myself, where I was able to break down my reality and try to hone in exactly what path I want to take for my future endeavors. And eventually, I got very tired of being up when the sun rose every day. Um, and so I said, I'm gonna make the motion to move and get a professional job where I'm also working with a farm. And so I found again another job out on the West Coast in Klamath Falls, Oregon, where I was working with a transitional living homestead. And I know that that's just kind of like a jumbled up bunch of words, but what it was a therapeutic team. So I worked with, I was a mentor, I was labeled a mentor. I worked with a team of counselors, licensed counselors, and then a psychiatrist who worked with everybody. And we had a group of, personally, my job was a group of 8 men who were anywhere from 18 to 23 years old, who were working through different experiences in their life, struggles or challenges. It could have been mental health, but it didn't always have to be. It could have just been learning living skills or getting social skills. There was a bunch of different, you know, evolving aspects that they were going through. And the exciting thing about this program was that I learned how to navigate horticulture therapy. And that was really cool. So I didn't realize that when I was in those woods by myself with my goats, I was actually experiencing internal horticulture therapy, because I was aligning my own growth with the growth of my farm, with the growth of plants and nature, and communing with nature. So I actually was trained and certified in knowing how to work that angle with people coming in, and it was really a transitional moment for me as well. And I stayed there for 8 years. We grew almost 70% of the food that we ate in that homestead, and that includes the meat and vegetables. So that was really awesome. And then I started falling in love with somebody who lived here. And this is my home for the most part. I mean, I grew up in Benton, so that's close. And I decided I was going to come back here and be with my family and pursue this marriage. And I got a job at a regenerative meat farm for about a year. And then the job at Shreveport Green came up, where I became the AmeriCorps member manager when I started in 2016. And since then, I've been here and been working nonprofit. My background, my degree is sociology. So it actually worked out. It was like I had all of this experience with nature and farming and therapeutic counseling, and then I had all of this educational background in nonprofit work and social work and different things of that nature. And I was able to take both of those experiences and ball them up and do what I'm doing today. So that's how I am doing what I'm doing, and I'm so happy. It's very cool to reflect on it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. That's amazing, and you've such like a rich background in all of this stuff. So like you said, I feel like merging your background and your work with Shreveport Green, I imagine, is pretty cool. So I want to hear more about Shreveport Green, especially hearing your background and your perspective. You have a wide perspective. Now I can understand like you have a wide background. So I'm curious to hear you explain Shreveport Green because I know you guys have a unique and impactful approach to this kind of work. So could you just give an overview what Shreveport Green is and what you guys do?
Yeah, so Shreveport Green started in 1990, and we became active under the mission to create a cleaner, healthier, more beautiful community. And the tenets of that were to mainly clean up litter, plant trees. Those were the two major components, and recycling. I will say that we did a big part of recycling. And in 1990, that was generally taught in schools. There was a lot of education surrounding it. And so we were able to come in and fill in those gaps with the educational components in schools, or facilitate major cleaning efforts through our affiliate program, Keep America Beautiful. And it was an awesome way to get started. And over the course of 3 decades, we have evolved in different ways. And the reason we do evolve is because, as you know, a city is a living entity. That's the way I like to look at it. We all make up this major organism, which is our city, which means that things change over time. Needs become different than what they were 3 decades ago. And we, as a nonprofit, have to be the first on the scene to understand how we can adapt and fill those gaps or fill those needs or acknowledge those needs, and still be working within our mission. So, since we started with litter pickups and tree plantings and recycling, we still do all of those. And but one of the things that we have added in the last decade is a big emphasis on agriculture and farming. So that's really where I came in. We started a garden behind our food bank in 2015, I imagine, and it was about 1 acre. We have an AmeriCorps program that I'm so proud of. It's called Shreveport. And for those who don't know, AmeriCorps is a program that's created similar to Peace Corps, but it facilitates folks that live in a community to get active serving their community in different ways. It provides a living stipend, which typically comes out to about minimum wage. And then at the end of the completion of your hours, you get an education award. So it's really beneficial for the members that take part. And during this time, our focus was on healthy futures for children. So we were growing food behind the food bank, and the members that I worked with were training at that food bank garden to learn how to grow food in schools with the kids. And we built that program to serve, I think we had 24, a garden of, or a network of 24 gardens at the time. We specifically worked with Title I schools and looked at areas that had little to no access. That was like the number one thing that we wanted to figure out. Who doesn't have access, who needs the most help, and where do our services make the most impact. So we worked at all these different schools around town. We had an entire curriculum created around nutrition education and gardening. The kids loved it. The kids we worked with were 7 to 11 years old. So we varied our curriculum based on, if they were older or younger. Um, but they all love it. The twinkle in a kid's eyes when they pull a carrot is remarkable and joyous, and absolutely fulfilled my choice to have this job every single day. So I loved doing that. And then in 2019, we were approached by a community development program here in Shreveport that said they were recently awarded a large HUD grant for the city. It was multi-million dollar grant that was supposed to serve a group of folks that were not well taken care of in the early 90s. There was an apartment complex that had to be completely removed, and I don't think there was any assistance there, and so the grant was there to serve those families that were removed inappropriately. And this grant was called the Choice Neighborhood Grant. We were asked to come on as partners and start an urban farm. In doing so, we were going to be working in collaboration with the folks that were receiving housing and receiving benefits from this neighborhood program. And so, and mark the year, it was 2019 when this all happened. So we had our plans together. Our AmeriCorps program was still running. The idea was that it was going to overlap with this. I was moving positions as the AmeriCorps program manager. I was now moving to urban farm director. And then 2020 hit, and everything just halted. And it was really, really, really difficult to pick up the pace in the direction where we needed to. But it still ended up working out in the long run. And by 2021, we had multiple garden beds, 75 feet long, in a 3-acre area in the center of our downtown, where folks who were living in Bayou Grand, which is the apartment complex that was built, could look out of their window and see the farm where food is growing that they were receiving at no cost. And it's still functioning today. And man, it is awesome. So if anybody is interested in going and checking out our farm, it is at 1034 Sprague Street. The programs that we have all depend on each other to work in this efficient, like synergistic machine. And so outside of our urban farm program and our AmeriCorps program, so AmeriCorps has the members that are learning how to grow food, why food is important, how to harvest, and how to address food inequity among the city. Then the AmeriCorps members are learning that. Then we have the urban farm that is really focused on creating that food. And so it works like that. And then we have a mobile market program. So our mobile market program started around the same time as our first food bank farm started in 2012, 2013. And the reason we have a mobile market program is because, again, we talk about food access, and often if you live in an area that has a grocery store nearby, you don't think about it. But lower income neighborhoods that specifically are in urban areas don't have access the way everyone else does. There are often grocery stores choose not to put their stores there because from an economic standpoint, they're like, oh, we're not going to make money, so we're just not going to do this. And what that ends up doing is leaving an entire population of people without access to fresh and healthy food. And then when you look at the health outcomes of certain areas around Shreveport, it's directly tied to heart disease, cardiovascular illness, hypertension, diabetes. And if you can't access fresh food, what are you going to eat? You have to eat something. So you're probably going to go to the nearest place and buy something, which is often going to be processed or fried or, in a bag of chips or something, which when you don't have options is your only option. And so our mobile market works to fill that gap, that need specifically. So we have worked with a local GIS guy who has been amazing at collecting data over the last 30 years and putting it on maps and understanding the highest places of need. And that's where we take all of the produce grown that is in excess from our choice neighborhood gardens, puts it into the mobile market, and then we drive out to a neighborhood that doesn't have access and we set up a farmer's market. Now, in these areas, we either give it away for free or we charge 50 cents a pound, which is much, much, much lower than what you're going to find in a grocery store. And we do that intentionally because many of these neighborhoods, while they don't have access, they are typically lower income as well. So we don't want to put a barrier in any way from having access to that produce. These markets have been incredible over the course of the last 10 years. We've had a lot of really incredible feedback. And we set it up just like a mini farmer's market. So we open up the van. The van is brightly colored. It has printed vegetables and fruits all over it so you don't miss it. We put it in a public place, so usually recreation centers and or churches. It just depends, maybe a park. We set it up, we make a regular schedule, so folks in the neighborhood will know that we come on the first Tuesday of every month at noon, for instance, but that's not, always the case. And as we set it up, we put it up all pretty. We make sure that it looks exactly like a farmer's market does. And then we do a cooking demo. And the cooking demo is typically something that is going to be really, really easy to cook, fast, and healthy. And the reason we add that cooking demo in, there's a few reasons, but the food on our table looks different than the food at the grocery store, and we recognize that because the food we grow looks different than grocery bought food. And there's a reason for that because seasonality is happening. So when you're growing food seasonally, you're not going to see strawberries in the middle of January, or you shouldn't see strawberries in the middle of January. You will at the grocery store, but guess what? They are nasty. And so we grow things like cushaw, which is a really well-known old school squash. It looks like a gourd, and it grows really, really well in our climate. It's acclimated to our climate. And when the seniors come out, they say, again, like I talk about the eyes, the twinkle in their eyes, they're like, oh my gosh, cushaw, I haven't seen this in 30 years. Or kids from their, grandparents will say, my grandma used to cook this and they make cushaw pie or whatever. So it's nostalgic, it's culturally relevant. But then in a way, it on the right generation, it can also be unfamiliar. So we take these unfamiliar products and we cook them up right there. And we offer free samples and give everybody a chance to get familiar with it so that we're not presenting something that is just this foreign, weird vegetable that feels awkward and, not acceptable. Like I would totally be weirded out if somebody was like, eat this, weird fruit from way outside of your reality. I'd be like, no, I'm good. So we have conversations, we build relationships with the folks that come to our market, and we talk about different ways that they cook it. And I think that is the most important part. It's coming back, recognizing, oh, Miss Rosie, hello, Miss Rosie, we've got your cushaw today, and how did you cook it last week? What was your experience? Do you want us to keep growing it? And really get some buy-in on that food. So that's our mobile market program, and I'm really proud of it. Something else that we do, so we could never grow the amount of food that is needed to fill that gap completely and fix it. That is a reality that I'm willing to admit. So another aspect of our mobile market and another aspect of Shreveport Green is that we supplement that food from local farmers. So we put a big emphasis on supporting local farmers in the area. And when we do that, we write our grants in such a way that we recognize the importance of sustaining our local farmers. So we purchase that produce from these folks at market rate. We do not want them paying out of pocket to donate to us because they have livelihoods too. So we purchase that food at market rate. We sell it at either 50 cents a pound or give it away for free. Those two pieces are incredibly important with what we do, and we make sure that that boundary stays there. We also recognize the farmers that we're supporting too, and we have a farmer training program right now. This is the second year we're doing it, so we're hoping to encourage a group of folks every single year that are just getting started. We want to encourage them to learn new business practices, to get acclimated with each other, discuss through networking all of the good and the bad and the relationships between what they're doing. And this is a statewide network of farmers as well. So we partner with Alexandria and Lafayette. And so we all get on calls together and we meet every other week for about 9 months in person too. That it gives them a chance to learn. And we invite people that are, you know, across the nation. We have business models that are presented, and so we do really relevant trainings to build up the farmer. And then we also do technical assistance with grants and loans, and that is through a partner project that we work with called the Louisiana Small Scale Agriculture Coalition. And that is also a statewide coalition that I'm really proud of. We started that in 2021 or 2022, 2021. And they're awesome. They give support and keep our state afloat with small farms. And that's something that is very hard for our federal government to acknowledge, because right now, and kind of typically always, the small farmer doesn't get a piece of the pie. And when I say that, I mean federal support goes to commodity farmers. And a commodity farmer is a farmer that is growing something typically on more than 100 acres. And unfortunately, a lot of those commodity farms are not food that we eat. So our farm bill goes to pay commodity farmers for not even creating food that goes into our grocery store. Most of the food that you see in the grocery store, and this just irks me to even have to say, is considered specialty crop, which is less than 1% of the farm bill for federal support. So I'm trying to always encourage people to learn more about this, because our farmers are expected to work for ducats, and it's a hard job. It doesn't pay off. You cannot get rich without the support of loans or capital or inherited wealth. So we put a big emphasis on supporting these local farms and advocate for them in different avenues as well. Okay, so to kind of take a quick turn in a different direction for what Shreveport Green does, we plant trees. And I know we talked about that at the beginning of this conversation, but we still put a big emphasis on tree planting, because it is so important for us as humans, as stewards of our land, to continue planting trees as they fall down. And I know that that seems crazy, but you know, it's scary when you have a tornado, when you have multiple tornadoes, and when you have climate change in the way that it is happening right now, currently in Shreveport. Trees can become a very scary problem to have. And what we're seeing is that people, out of fear, are just cutting down these old growth trees and hoping that they're not going to, you know, get in the way of their homes or their families or their cars or whatever it is. What ends up happening when lots of people are cutting down old growth trees, there's a number of things. Obviously, the oxygen changes. That's number one. But trees, especially old growth trees, absorb massive amounts of storm water. So when you don't have them there, the flooding is terrible, and the runoff is terrible. So you start to see things like erosion and major floods happening. But also their tree canopy, when you have a bunch of trees together in an area, it reduces wind shear. So by cutting trees, you're actually increasing the chance of really bad straight line winds that are still going to hurt your house. Beyond that, transpiration is a very important part of our ecosystem. So having trees reduces your chance for drought in those hotter months. And so our emphasis is around planting trees, planting native trees specifically, and encouraging folks to understand that that is a great way to learn patience, nurture nature, and get back to helping, create safer systems in your neighborhood. It reduces heat island effect. I could go on and on and on about trees. I love trees are just my heart. But then, again, there's also other efficient ways to plant trees, like a fruit orchard. And so we planted, I think 400 fruit trees in the last 6 months and created fruit orchards throughout our city. Because again, they have the root system that's going to fill in. They give you that patience. They also give back. So if somebody wants to commune with a fruit tree and they nurture it, they plant it, they nurture it, they watch it grow, in a couple years that tree is going to thank you, and you're going to be able to receive that fruit from it just by taking care of it and just by creating relationship with it. So yeah, that is the gist of what we do. We still do those litter cleanups, and we partner with projects throughout Shreveport to make sure that those are still happening. We encourage folks to get in the water, because Cross Lake is one of our biggest bodies of water here. That is also our drinking water. And so we get out into the water, we do cleanups in the water, and we talk about what we found. And there's a lot of education around it. I could go on and on, clearly, but I'll, stop there.
No, that's amazing. That was a ton of amazing information and a lot of things that I had wanted to ask you about anyway. So I'm glad you like covered some things that I was like, oh, I really wanted to ask. And you had mentioned trees too at the end. And that was something whenever I was doing research for this episode, I was like, the tree thing is interesting because I don't feel like I know as much about that. So I'm excited to hear that you're very into trees because I will ask you about that then. I'll make sure. But I love the holistic approach to a lot of this and a lot of the work that Shreveport Green does, and the impact is just like you said. Everything kind of works together, and they are almost reliant on each other. All the different like programs that you guys have, so that's really cool. I'd love to hear more about the community garden spaces. What are the goals with like you kind of mentioned the goals already, but I guess for those specifically, not only what are the goals, but what is the impact of having that type of thing in a town or a city, especially a city like Shreveport, which is not rural.
Sure, yeah. I think there's almost more importance on creating these green spaces, because when you look at the research, if you just want to take it down to research alone, not experience, green spaces like these gardens actually decrease crime. They create third spaces for folks who maybe don't want to go to a bar or don't want to go out and spend money, and don't want to go home. So it creates these community hubs in neighborhoods where people can go out into a green space, and it increases mental health. It makes everything there's just so much research that shows the positive benefits of being immersed in a green space in an urban area. And while Shreveport does have a few different parks where green spaces are accessible, it's not everywhere. So when we are choosing these areas, we're looking at that specifically to make sure that we're not doubling up on a green space that is already in existence, because if we do find a place that is a green space that's already in existence but needs a little help, we'll partner with the city or we'll partner with our parish to come in and add a little bit of extra zhuzh to it. We might plant some trees, we might do a garden, we might add a little park. It just depends on what that community says that they need and how we can facilitate that. So again, it's community driven. We will never go into an area without community buy-in first. That's number one. But our Shreveport program changed direction last year, and instead of doing Healthy Futures with kids in schools, we're working on unused lots in neighborhoods. So it comes back to what you asked about community gardens. So this last year, we have worked with local partnered nonprofits who have properties that they're not using right now. And they also have buy-in from neighborhood communities already. So we work with those communities to build orchards and gardens and make these green spaces happen in areas that were completely underused or not used at all, or even vacant. One of Shreveport's largest issues, and I think this goes for many cities, urban cities specifically, we have, it's over 5,000 vacant lots just in the city limits. And many of those vacant lots over time become dumping areas. People will dump their garbage or they'll accumulate garbage, whether somebody's dumping it or not. It just becomes a place where it's an eyesore. People are like, it gets overgrown. And honestly, that's when crime starts happening. The lots can be used for things that are not really great for the neighborhood, and it can also bring in environmental hazards. So we have worked really, really hard to remediate these lots through different initiatives. So I do want to explain what remediation looks like. So that means that we are going and finding lots that are specifically gathering garbage and environmental hazards like tires or scrap metal or old paint, and we test the soil first. We'll clean up the trash and then we test the soil. And we want to make sure that before we do anything extra, we are working in the most the healthiest possible manner. So for instance, if we tested a lot and found that there were high levels of lead, we're not going to plant food. And but what we would plant is a phytoremediator. And it's a big word to say a plant that sucks up the lead and cleans the soil over time. And many of those plants that people don't know are like sunflowers and bamboo and certain types of mushrooms. But even beyond those plants that act as phytoremediators, you can start to build that soil over time. And we do that through partnering with local tree companies to get their wood chips. So they'll come and dump wood chips on these properties over and over, and then we spread it and we spread it. And eventually we'll get this 2-foot, tall wood chip area that at the bottom is composting. It's feeding all these microbes. Those microbes are then like roly-polies, for instance, pill bugs. They take in these heavy metals. That's part of what they do. They eat it, and then their poop is healthy. They also, break down certain elements and minerals that are then able to get back into our systems as humans. So, when we think about minerals, for instance, you kind of have to wonder, how does that get into a plant? Because a mineral is typically a harder substance that comes in a large form, right? Well, it takes certain plants and animals to break it down for us so that we, in the chain of relationship, are able to absorb it, and we have to have it. So lichen is a wonderful example of something that is able to break down rocks over hundreds, thousands of years even, but then breaks down the minerals to where the plants that we eat absorb it, and then it gets into our systems. And the same thing for animals. So as we're working on these lots and working alongside folks in the neighborhood, we're having these conversations, right? So, and they're very much that. It's not us having a moment where we come out and we say, "Hey, we're going to come and just talk to you about what we're doing out here and why it's beneficial." It's very relational, and just like I'm talking to you right now, I'm telling you like, "Oh, this is something really cool," and I'm hoping that you're asking me questions. That's what we're gauging. We're doing a bit of community engagement with a little bit of education in it. And what I find with that method of getting involved with the community is people are actually really interested in it. And they're learning things that, I mean, why would they? Do we all learn that in science class in school? No. That's not things that are just readily available unless you seek them out. And who has time to do that except for somebody like me who's obsessed with this stuff? Um, so, so we're having these conversations. It's very interactive, and I find I learn so much from engaging with them too. There's so many different ways that having these conversations has informed me to go and like, okay, I'm going to go down this rabbit hole and learn about what Mr. Keller just told me about erosion because he's a civil engineer that worked in New Orleans after Katrina. And it's just this it's mimicking the ecosystem and the natural biodiversity that exists but in society. It's recognizing that what we do as humans, as interaction, is directly mirrored in many different systems that are this like meta version of reality. So we just have to act in a way that our microorganisms are acting. We just have to acknowledge that we are not a part, we're not removed from the system, but we are a part of the system. And it's really just that.
Hmm. Yeah, that's amazing and such a like beautiful, well put answer. I want to ask about that to get to that the community part of it because I know that a lot of this requires community building, whether it's with other organizations or with people, like you said. Um, okay, I want to ask you one more question before, as we start to close. I said I'd ask about trees, and I will, because I'm curious. I think this is true for a lot of the work that you do, a lot of environmental work. There are a lot of misconceptions and just things that people don't know about a lot of environmental work. So I wonder, and I'll focus it around trees, but what are some things that people don't understand or are surprised by with how much trees benefit our environment? Because even what you said about the flooding with hurricanes is not something I had thought about either. So are there other examples like that that people, you just be surprised that people don't know that, we have this earth that provides a lot of these things for us?
Yeah, yeah, I love that question. I might be a little frozen. Okay, there it goes.
You're good.
Yeah, so one of the things that is always kind of illuminating is that folks feel like trees last forever. They are ancient beings. They can be here for much longer than humans, but they do have an end date. And they're different. All different species are different from each other. So recognizing that life cycle in a particular tree and acknowledging when it's starting to tell you that it's reaching the end of its life cycle is an important part of keeping yourself safe. So I'm going to use an example. So in my neighborhood, the neighborhood was pretty much built in the 50s and 60s. And when they did that, they, started kind of with I guess, a flat. They just mowed everything down and then built this neighborhood all at once. And they did add a lot of trees, which thank you. And a lot of what I see is live oak. Now, live oaks, they can live for hundreds of years. And those that live for hundreds of years are typically in the woods. And there is a very, very big difference between a tree that has grown itself in the middle of the woods versus a tree that was planted by a human in an urban area. So the life cycle is different. And we have this perception that trees are the trees that we understand that are in the woods and they live as long as those, and they do not, unfortunately. There's many things going on underground, mycelial communities, the ecosystem just working its magic in the woods versus planting a tree in an area where it's surrounded by concrete or housing or just has regular mowing happening around it. All of these things make a difference on the life cycle of that tree. So your tree, your live oak, we'll just use that one for an example, may only live for 75 to 100 years. We're hoping 100 years, to be honest. It's going to be a big tree at that time, but if it starts to lose its life, you'll start to notice it as it drops as it drops branches, and that tree is allowing itself to decompose. And well, we're going to switch it to pines. This is one of my favorite stories about pines. So we have been informed of the pine bark beetle, right? The pine bark beetle is an invasive species. It's tearing down our pine forests. These are all things that are true. But when you uncover the reality of it, what is actually happening is that pine bark beetles have existed much longer than humans. And the reason we are seeing a major influx of pine bark beetles is because our climate is not conducive to that pine tree anymore, to that longleaf pine, or it might be the loblolly. I can't remember the specific pine that it goes after, but our climate is not the same climate that it was when those pine trees were existing the way they were. So they're getting weaker, they're dying sooner, and the pine bark beetle is just doing its job, which is to decompose the tree. And we're seeing such massive influx of them because these trees are already weak. And one of my favorite things that I've heard recently is that they're the pallbearers. It was already happening. It's a weak tree. You can spray, you can try to control, but that tree was already having symptomatic issues that drew that pine bark beetle in. So when you're looking at your trees in your area, start to notice the little things. Get familiar with your tree. Go out and talk to it. Go talk to it. Or don't. I don't know. Just look at it. Just try to create some type of acknowledgement and understanding of what's going on with the trees in your yard, in your neighborhood, and get used to how they look. Because when that starts to change, you'll notice. And then do a quick Google. I tell everybody the best way we can learn is to get curious and ask questions. So if you start to see a pine tree that's dropping limbs, maybe all the other pine trees around have really great green flush on them, but this one pine tree is not growing, you can guarantee something's happening. Look at the bark, peel it back. Do you see something? And just get very, very curious about what's going on, and then ask the questions that are in line with what is going on. Answer the questions for yourself. Call your local tree service. Ask them to come out and look for it. And as you start to do these things, you'll get more familiar with the life cycle of a tree, what's good, what's bad, what's dangerous, what's not. And then maybe the long run will be that you can start to understand the end of the tree, honor that. Honor the tree, say thank you for everything you've done for the last 5 decades you've been alive, or however long, I think it's really important to acknowledge that they are also entities. They may be different than us, but they are a part of us, and they've done a lot for us longer than we've been around. So you may have to take that tree down early, but then plant a tree nearby. Plant something similar, or plant something native. That's really the most important part. Look at what's going on in your neighborhood and start to recognize the varieties that are thriving. And you'll notice that most of those are going to be a native variety. And plant something near it. Also, never plant a tree in the hole that you removed one from. That is a big no-no, and I think that even as we're planting, that's an easy thing to want to do because it makes sense to put the tree exactly where it was, but more than likely that tree won't make it if you do that. So scoot it over, even if it's just 10 to 20 feet in a different direction, you'll see more life out of that tree in the long run. and make sure that if you're working with diseased trees, understand why. What is going on? What is happening that is causing this to happen? And over the course of, a few years, has something changed in our climate or in our ecosystem that is causing, an infection? And so just get very, very curious and learn about your urban buds, your urban tree buds, and then just get familiar with them. That's the biggest thing that I could say about learning trees. But again, there's just so many different things they do. I just touched on heat island, but cities experience this thing called heat island effect, which is when you look at the general temperature of a city, it is about 5 to 10, sometimes even 20 degrees higher in temperature than the external areas. And that is strictly due to the lack of tree canopy and the replacing of with concrete or asphalt. It raises our temperature significantly. And so, as we are considering taking down these trees, please plant new ones. And please consider the type of trees you're planting. For instance, sycamore tree, it's a slow grower, but it is going to be one of the most beneficial trees for grabbing up that storm water. And when I say holding storm water, I think that it's important to kind of go deeper into that, because you might think like, oh well, that's not going to make it to our aquifer, or why would we want to do that? But it's actually really important so that it stabilizes our ground. And the most important thing we can do is consider our soil as like the skin of earth. The skin is the largest organ on our body, and the soil that we live on, we cannot let it, go fallow. We have to actually consistently make sure it's fertile and healthy, because there's 6 inches of topsoil that is actually the whole reason humans exist today. So removing a tree and allowing all that topsoil to wash off into the drains, and removing that water that feeds the microbes and all of the pieces that make up our healthy soils, is really bad for the environment. But then again, also, trees absorb carbon. As we're polluting the earth, the trees are absorbing it and holding it in their roots. They're using it in a way, and they're giving back oxygen. And I think that's one thing that most people know about trees, but I always just want to touch on it and remind everybody that that is how we breathe. So please plant trees more and more, and get familiar with them, make relationships with them, learn how to be patient, learn how to listen, and just reconvene with nature in every way possible.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you for that. I feel like people can learn a lot from this conversation. I know I definitely have with you. There's so much we can learn by, like you said, having a relationship with nature and the nature around us. And also, there's a social aspect to it as well, like you touched on. So I really appreciate this conversation. Is there anything else you want to say before we close?
Yeah, if you want to get involved with us, or you just want to kind of check out what we're doing here in Shreveport, you can always go to shreveportgreen.org. Or you can check out all of our socials. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. We're always taking volunteers. We're often hiring within that area. But if you have new ideas and you want to get involved that way, if you're a visionary person, please send me all of your ideas. I love talking about new ways we can bring nature back into our built environment.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. I feel like I could pick your brain about all these different things for hours and hours, but I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.